Untold Assam, the series that brings you the inspiring stories of Assamese living abroad.
So I think the Assamese community, have always been there for me. Both my parents' roots are Lower Assam, so I was raised with kind of Kamrupia language, and especially for Indian men, I don't think we talk about this, but there's a real trauma in immigration, right? You're leaving your home, leaving everything you know, you have joblessness, oftentimes you're penniless, right? Men get away with promising, and then I think women have to execute. And so I just feel like that's unfair. My lesson from CNN is that all those articles we were writing, nobody was necessarily reading them in the scale that we thought they were. Is our intention to really reach them, or are we committing journalism for the journalists?
Mitra Kalita, a veteran journalist, media executive, prolific commentator, and author of 2 books.
Assamese by origin, but born and brought up in the precincts of New York.
It's unlocking access and opportunity for journalists and all communities.
Today's guest is S. Mitra Kalita, an award-winning journalist, media founder, and an author based in the US. She was the senior vice president at CNN in New York. Prior to that, she was the managing editor at the LA Times. She has also worked as a journalist at renowned publications such as the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. Although she was born and raised in the US, she feels deeply connected to Assam and Assamese culture. Please welcome S. Mitra Kalita. Mitra, thank you so much for your time. I was really looking forward to this conversation. I'm so glad that you could take out time. And yeah, it's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you are an award-winning journalist, co-founder of a media company. You are an author, commentator. You are a visiting professor at 4 universities. You are also a founding editor for 3 different startups. How do you do all of this?
Oh, well, I don't do all of it at the same time. I think that's the secret. So I think, everything you just mentioned, thank you. It's very flattering, but really, each of those were different chapters in my career. And, I think for women, especially, there's this tension between, like this idea of having it all, right? Which comes up a lot. And by one standard, I feel like I do have it all, right? Because I feel like I've done a lot in my career. And then by other standards, I feel like, not at all, right? Like there's still so much to do. It still feels like every day, I've let somebody down. I think this idea of kind of balance, anybody who says like, I feel perfectly aligned in all aspects of my life, like I would love to know what their secret is. So I'm flattered, but I think, there's a correction, which is like, I don't have it all, right? It's just, I've been very fortunate. The one thing I'd say is like, I have very supportive community, both like the Assamese community that I was raised within, obviously my parents, and then my in-laws, in terms of raising the children and just having support systems at home. And then like physical proximity of my neighbors and like having people who will always pitch in. And so I think there is almost like what you don't see for women who have it all is this like invisible layer of people who catch us when we fall, which is of course all the time.
I think wonderfully put together. All the work that I have seen you have done so far, it feels like, I think you have a very passion-driven mindset, but you have not really said so much about it, but you have spoken about the support system, which is, I think, equally important, isn't it, to align with your vision so that your support system can actually support you. You worked as the senior vice president at CNN Digital till 2020. I think that role, you had so many things to manage. You looked after breaking news, you looked after features, national news, opinion pieces, and on top of that, you also had to look after the team. CNN consistently ranks as the leading online news destination, and Assamese leading that is truly, truly inspiring. Was that role significant in your career? One, because that is such a senior leadership position, but I think prior to that, you also worked in mostly print, and
Right.
in this role, you almost became like an online guru in journalism. So in that, regards also, was this quite a significant role?
And that served me really well. So, in my 5 years at CNN, I started out with maybe about 30 people. By the time I left, I had more than 200, officially on my team. But I also feel like there were thousands of people at CNN, and I feel like I worked with thousands of people at CNN. The Assamese piece of it, I sometimes get embarrassed because, as you know, like if I get a job, like the Assamese media will write about it in like really big ways, or if there's like a prize, or like when LA Times won the Pulitzer, there were like so many articles about like Assamese lady lead team, and it's when you're in an organization and you're getting all this credit, it feels a little weird, but it also looks a little bit weird, right? Because everyone is like, well, who are you, and why does your community care so much about this, right? And my father, I said something to my father about this. I was like, that's so embarrassing. And he was like, it's not about you.
True.
It's not about you.
No.
And so I think that was actually very freeing, because what you realize is when people see themselves in you, whether that's women or digital people who are saying, actually, look, digital is getting its seat at the table, or they're, or again, like I said, women or mothers who say, oh, she has young children and she's made it. Or of course, Indians, South Asians, people of color. And so the more you start to say, this isn't about me, this is about people who see themselves elevated, one, it takes a little bit of the pressure off, but also you come with great responsibility. That means that there's a lot of people who are counting on you to, deliver on their behalf.
Yes.
So I think the Assamese community, have always been there for me. And I think and then I think about my own reaction when I hear somebody is Assamese, they, for example, like when Rima Das's film was put forward to the Oscars,
Yeah.
I am so proud of her. I didn't know her, right? And then I later met her at Lincoln Center when she was doing a screening, and she met me, she met my parents, like she touched my parents' feet. And there is this kinship of our people that's kind of instant.
Yes.
And I think it's not just that we're Assamese, it's that we recognize how hard it is to make it in spaces where there are no other Assamese, let alone sometimes other Indians.
Yeah.
And just come from this background. And so I think a lot of our respect for each other, for the Assamese that are kind of operating in some of these professional settings, is not just, I'm so proud of you, but it is also, how can I help you?
Yes.
And I love that. I love that about you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say your dad is a wise man when he said that it's not about you, it's about celebrating them. And like you said, Assam is a place where even not all Indians know so much about Assam. So foreign Assamese, when that person is leading an organization like CNN, which has got the largest audience in the world, and leading a team of, you have said 200, and it feels like 1,000. It's a pride for the community as a whole. Talking about your dad, Your parents, they are from Assam. They moved to America, and you obviously grew up in America. So was it for work that they moved to America? And which part of Assam they are from?
Sure. My father's from Hadia, so in Upper Assam.
India.
Yeah, their original roots are in Baranghati, which is a village outside of Guwahati, about 3 hours. And I share this because both my parents' roots are Lower Assam. So I was raised with kind of Kamrupia language, right? Which is a very important part of their identity. But I was also raised with kind of the culture, geography, beauty, if you will, of Upper Assam. And also Hadia being a very rural, remote part of Assam, but having kind of this British history, right?
That's
because it was a British outpost. And so I think that the kind of complicated nature of our own identity within Assam, laid the roots for how we feel home in many different places, right? My mom is from Hantipur, which section of Guwahati. Her house is like a very old house on the banks of the Brahmaputra. They're right across the fire brigade that used to be there on the main A2 road. And she's like a city girl, like original roots in Nalbari, but like really a city kid. They had an arranged marriage. They never met before their wedding day. What ended up happening was my father applied for the green card lottery in the U.S. He got his green card to come to the U.S. His mother said, "You can't go until you get married," because she was worried he would find somebody elsewhere. So they quickly arranged his marriage. He got married in May, and he arrived in the U.S. in December of 1971. And then my mom came a few years later. By then, my brother had been born.
It sounds like you know so much about Assam, and I think you visit Assam quite regularly. So you must have been to Hodia, Hanti, and your Hantipur, which is just in Guwahati. So you must have visited all of these places, right? And you have a family as well. I think your husband is Indian, but not Assamese.
Punjabi, that's yeah.
Correct. And you have two daughters as well. So they all have visited Assam, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they really love, everybody loves Assam. I think it's partly cultural. It's a distinct culture. And so for my husband, who's an artist, there's a fascination with, everything from masks to Hatriya to, we're so lucky because we also have these like symbols of what it means to be Assamese. Like, like Hankar Dev is this brilliant construct and also enables the passing down of culture no matter where you live, right? Sure. And so I think there's a interest in this like almost ancient culture, but actually it feels very modern.
Very modern, yes.
The ability for us to practice no matter where we are, and there's an element of democracy built into.
I know that you're so connected to the Assamese community, even in America. You are a part of all the events that the community organizes in America. Do you think it is also because of the fact the way your parents have brought you up, that it's so embedded in your life, and now you're passing that on to your daughters as well?
Yeah, I think, a lot of these, mostly men, they came here in the 1970s. They didn't have anybody else. And so they had each other, and there's a relationship. You could psychoanalyze it, but, there is, and especially for Indian men, I don't think we talk about this, but there's a real trauma in immigration, right? You're leaving your home, leaving everything you have joblessness, oftentimes you're penniless. There's a real desperation, right? And so I think these men found each other in this moment in their lives that was really quite transformational, but they also used each other to find jobs, to live together. They had a system of who's going to do the shopping, who's going to do the laundry, who's going to do the cooking. I mean, I was raised by these guys. They're not blood relatives, but there's no question of how loved we all were.
So you then worked for many prestigious globally recognized media houses, publications like Los Angeles Times, where you said you were a managing editor. Then you also worked for Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. You have done phenomenally well for your career. But as a woman of color, did you have to face challenges as you progressed in your career? And even today, do you think you have challenges that probably your male counterparts don't have? Do you have those challenges?
I think there's a lot of men who start media companies, and just on the promise of what they are planning or their ambitions, they get a lot of attention, a lot of coverage, a lot of funding, right? For someone like me, it feels like you have to prove that you've done it, you've proven value, you've shown the success, and then people write about you. And that's very frustrating because it feels like, I too have big ideas and big ambitions, but if you're always going to hold me to the standard of the proof of concept versus the articulation of intention, right? Men get away with promising, and then I think women have to execute. And so I just feel like that's unfair. I think in my career, it's come up in different phases. Like the reality is we have to deal with biology. Like we have a finite window in which we can, have our children. And the reality is that comes against when most of our careers are on the way up. And then what, right? And so I was lucky because I had a lot of female mentors, but also actually I also had a lot of men who were looking out for me and just said, let her go part-time, let her work from home, give her whatever she wants. Now, the thing is, I had to build up a lot of goodwill before I had children. You have to be so good and so indispensable so that when you have your children, they'll say, okay, look the other way and give you whatever you want, right?
You actually have raised something similar to what I heard from other women who are at really senior leadership positions. They say, if anything from these challenges, it has shaped them in becoming more empathetic and also committing to, situations where it is more equitable, like you just said, so that it's not just for them, but for the others who are coming up behind them so that they can create that space. So I think that's what women are doing who are at the top. You are such an accomplished media personality. You have seen so many highs, but maybe I'm also right in saying that you might have had stages where you faced rejections. There were jobs that you were expecting you would have, but you didn't. Same for promotions. You might be exhausted. You might, feel stuck. What did you tell then to pick up yourself and keep going anyway? What did you tell yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a few times in my career, you'll get asked to seek a position and they're not really serious, right? It's they just need someone to apply. They need to say they diversified who they asked. That's happened a few times. One is you still have an audience, right? So I always feel I was asked, for example, to apply to be the editor-in-chief of Newsweek. This was a long time ago in my career. And I knew I had no chance, but I was grateful for the audience because for the first time it made me picture what would it be like for me to be absolutely in charge of a news organization, right? And so even in the rejection or this isn't really going to happen, in your head, it kind of changes how you see yourself. And I've chosen to see that as a positive because it kind of stokes the ambition within. I think also you get to meet people in these processes and they might not think a lot of you. And then they're like, actually, that woman is really smart, right? Like you don't always get these audiences to articulate your vision for how you operate, right? And that's kind of the problem now with like celebrating careers, especially remote setting. You know, like LinkedIn is always like, I'm so proud to announce, and then you like insert new position, your award, but it's not always like substantive. Like, how do you actually operate? Right? And so for me, it's been important for me to articulate to people, this is how I operate. This is how I see journalism. This is how I see management. This is how I see revenue. This is me writing articles all the time. Like, I don't know of any men in my peer group who write articles as often as I do. And I say that not because I'm damning them, but it's like, I still have to practice so that you all can see that I know what I'm doing.
You also worked in India. You also mentioned, I think before, I think from 2006 to 2008, and you joined as the founding editor for Mint, which is a part of Hindustan Times Group. What made you shift your base all the way to India?
I mean, it's kind of similar to what you're saying, like the career trajectory. And it felt like my career had taken a certain trajectory. I wanted to go to India, but I had a child and I couldn't go. Like at that time, if you remember, after 9/11, everyone going to India was really covering Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it felt like as a young mother, I couldn't do that. Right. So how am I going to get overseas? And it wasn't happening for me in the traditional ways because it would have to be like kind of like our foreign correspondents are largely war correspondents. So I got a phone call from Raju Narasetti, who at the time was at the Wall Street Journal, and he was launching Mint. And I sent him a note saying, wow, I'm so jealous, right? And my phone rang within minutes of him receiving that email.
Wow.
And so when I say like I've had like a lot of mentors, an example of someone who, you know, sees that and he's already playing chess. He's steps ahead of me. And so having someone like that who's like, okay, well, you could come. And I was like, no, at the time I had a 1-year-old and he's like, so what? You know, like it's a real, that was kind of what propelled going to India. I'm so glad because I entered management, like again, sort of seeing around the corner. I learned how to operate in a global environment.
Did you learn anything new about how journalism works in India versus how it is in America? Was there anything new?
Patience. Like I really respected our reporters who would go and sit in the ministry and just wait for hours for an interview or a scoop or an answer. And I think the endurance of Indian journalism, you know, it really focuses on this belief that there will be some delivery.
What does the future of journalism look like to you? I mean, do you think quality will still stand a chance in this click-driven world?
Yeah. I mean, I think quality depends on how we're defining it. And also if we stay stuck to our definition of quality being a particular format, right? And so I talk to people all the time who will say, you know, they're all on TikTok or this video or short form. And it's like, that's the reality of consumption, right? And it's also not necessarily a new thing. Like my lesson from CNN is that all those articles we were writing, nobody was necessarily reading them in the scale that we thought they were, right? So I think we have to be upfront about how people are consuming and honest about how are we reaching people. Is our intention to really reach them or are we committing journalism for the journalists, right? So I hope that there's some honesty around that. I think there's going to have to be some new revenue generation ideas. Like it's just too, we've been so disrupted by advertising and the platforms right now. Like I just don't see how that continues without more models, whether that's reader revenue or the insights that we're gleaning from our communities and our audiences, and we're able to package that. I think there needs to be some more innovation and risk taking in those spaces. I do think this, you mentioned niche audiences. I think the mainstream media's end is quite close. There is a mainstream media we agree upon, but we don't agree upon a lot within that. And so that feels pretty fraught. And then I think there's the next few years, I'm frustrated because you can have journalism with massive accountability, but if a politician, for example, is not on the receiving end of accountability, then what was all this for? And so I think you're going to have a lot of frustrated people who are saying, well, what is the point? And so there has to be a purpose that drives us beyond the reaction of a politician or kind of an institutional response. I think there has to be a commitment to this is the right way to do things. We might not have the outcomes that we desire as a result, but we're committed to the right way to do things. Can we at least begin with that premise?
Thank you so much, Mitra, for this conversation. This was insightful, and it is such a delight to hear everything that you have said. I wish all the best to you and URL Media.
Oh, thank you. Our more Pinarpab. Dhanyawad, Mike.